We're back. You're listening to Politics Powered by Twitter. I'm Lee Brenner. You can reach me at Deep Dish Paul.
I'm Pamela Kirkland, and you can reach me at Pamela XM POTUS.
And I'm Slade Somer. You can get me at Slade HV, as in hyper vocal.
And we are joined now by Anna Marie Cox, who's a political columnist for The Guardian here in the U.S. She's got over 1.3 million followers, and you can reach her at Anna Marie Cox. She's one of the first digital kind of reporters in this world with Wonkhead. Anna Marie, it's Lee Brenner. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me on.
It's great to talk to you. So you've been obviously covering this for years and years, but and let's say even just this election seems like it's that long. But so Veep stakes, which is we've been talking about how horrible of a word that is, seems to be the story of the day, and we just kind of want it to be over with already.
Yeah, well, I mean, the good news is it will be over. The bad news is that nothing will ever stop people from doing this kind of pointless speculation. The selection of the vice presidential candidate is really one of the stories where it is almost impossible to do reporting. That it is a decision that rests with one man ultimately, right. And that's unlike most political decisions. It's only the vice presidential candidate does the president need to feel personally comfortable on all levels with, And so I always feel like when we have these in-trade, statistics or people are saying, well, I'm hearing such and such or so-and-so has a buzz, that all may be true, but, Romney could at the last minute decide he just likes someone better than everybody else. And that's going to matter more than anything else.
Yeah, in the last couple of days, we were talking about how 4 years ago, the Wikipedia page for Sarah Palin changed a number of times in the last 24 hours. Now everybody's watching that to see if they can get some sort of insight. But you're right. In the end, it just comes down to his decision at that last minute. Even you saw 4 years ago where it went down to Pawlenty and Sarah Palin in 24 hours. He finally just decided, you know what, I'm going with Sarah.
That's right, and it's a gut call. I think that it's a gut call that does say a lot about the candidate. I mean, obviously, people made decisions about McCain based on his decision to go with Sarah Palin. And so it is one of those things. It's a really interesting sort of X-ray onto the president. And I think, however, though, it sort of matters more in that way than it does in the electoral college way that traditionally we're kind of used to seeing it. When people do their analysis, that's the way they kind of do, kind of try to run the numbers. It may make some difference in picking up a state or two or the South or a certain region. But it's not going to make all the difference. I think, again, it's really going to come down to, I bet Mitt Romney's looking at this as a hiring process. Right. I mean, he is a business guy.
He loves to hire people. That's the inverse. That's the inverse of the famous. So before we switch to Obama and the female vote, who do you think is going to win this horse race?
Oh, well, selfishly, I got to say Pawlenty, because I live in St. Paul now. So
there you go.
And he and I run into each other a fair amount. There's only one. There's a local television studio where anyone who's going to do any kind of cable news hit, you go to that studio. So he and I see each other all the time. He's an awesome makeup room buddy. But that's just personal, I actually know him a little bit from the McCain campaign too, when he was a surrogate for McCain. And so he's the only person I've actually met among these people, so I can vouch for him being exactly as boring and nice as he appears to be.
He's he's from the Midwest, just like us. Yeah.
Yep. Just like me.
Yep. I'm from Chicago. I'm there too. It's okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go on to Obama campaigning yesterday with Sandra Fluke out in Denver, and there's been a lot of kind of speculation that this was, so that Obama can kind of shore up this female vote, especially kind of advancing this quote unquote war on women meme. Mm-hmm. Is that something that, do you believe there is a GOP, let's just say war on women, because that's easiest to say right now.
Go ahead.
Go for it. And then I was just going to say, and do you think Obama is, trying to capitalize on that at this point?
Well, those are two different questions and not necessarily related, right?
Sure, absolutely.
I have been covering politics for a while. It's sort of embarrassing to think about it, how long I've been doing it. And, I have sources and friends on the Republican side, people who are lifelong conservatives. And I know that these people, men and women alike, do not want to take women's rights back to the 19th century. I know that they may disagree with me on things like abortion and contraception, but it is not out of malice. It is, I think, and that's where the term war on women, I think, gets under people's skin, people on the right, who do have differing sort of social views, social policy views. And in some ways, I think that the use of that term can really fire up the Republican base, maybe, more than they, would ever sort of think, because it is kind of offensive if you just legitimately believe, for whatever reason, your religious beliefs, your upbringing, whatever, in these things that have an impact on women's lives, to be told that you are engaging in a war on women. Now, do I believe that some of these social policies that conservatives put forward do, in fact, undermine women's rights? Yes, I do. Personally, I believe that. And I believe that is what, the Obama campaign is the legitimate hook that they have for putting this kind of campaigning forward. And I do think there are a lot of women, suburban women, and single women, single mothers especially, who see that is the problem, who maybe, and unfortunately there are the kind of headlines recently that make it sound like a war on women. You use the word transvaginal probe, you're not going to gain votes. Right. That's a scary set of words. And it was a real policy that got talked about. It's one of the reasons why, I suspect that McConnell will not be on the ticket. But, the gender gap is not, Obama's pretty much in a lot of the swing states. He's leading with women. It sort of narrows and grows a little bit as you look at the polls over time. But I think what he's doing now is shoring up that gap more than widening it.
And that kind of brings up the point of when you're talking about the language of war on women and how it can affect things. This campaign is clearly going to get negative very quick. It's already negative.
But, getting negative.
Right.
Yeah.
But you look at the Priorities USA ad, that's the controversy today. And that obviously it's on both sides and you see these, but it's just going to get, it seems, worse and worse over the next 2 months.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've tried to this year made an extra special effort to go outside the normal sort of political ranks when I'm reporting on these stories, the consultants and the political figures and the analysts. And I've actually talked to some political scientists who study voting patterns and study why people vote. And one of the things that they keep saying to me, which is a little disconcerting, is they'll sort of explain things like, as we all probably know, most people are not paying attention right now, right? So this Priorities USA ad that was very smart of them to release it now. But that people start to pay attention at the end, that actually negative ads don't necessarily, they turn people off, but they don't keep them away from the polls. Anyway, it's interesting data, but then every single person I talk to ends it with, but you know what, we've never seen an election like this. Right. The unregulated spending that's happening and the extent of negativity throws all of this historical data off. People are just political scientists are kind of just throwing up their hands saying none of our models necessarily will work this time. Because of this unprecedented, basically just amount of money being poured into it.
Right. And speaking of money, I actually had one other question. You tweeted earlier, or you retweeted the Newsmax story that Donald Trump, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but he's declining an invitation to speak because of, quote, pressing global business pursuits, which I assume is a golf course somewhere. I don't know. But,
It is. That's such an awesome, I am not sure what that's a euphemism for. Yeah, maybe it's playing golf. But maybe.
Well, I was going for building a golf course, but
Oh, building a golf course. But it is interesting, and it's sort of one of those things that sounds, it sounds both like you're saying pressing, so obviously that's important. It's global, that's important. But seriously, it's the Republican National Convention,
Right.
he could have an impact, and he's choosing to, do whatever it is that you do that's global pressing business. You would think that there's nothing kind of more important than influencing the election of the most powerful man in the world. But you know what? The Donald has his own priorities, and it includes pressing global business.
I'm going to call it now that they beam him in from wherever he is, and he says...
And there are palm trees behind him? No.
Yeah, whatever it is, he says, President Obama, and he does the thing, you're fired. I guarantee it.
Yeah, Lee, I got to tell you, if that happens, I'm throwing my television out the window. That would be offensive. That would be legitimately offensive.
I do have to say that I am, lucky enough that I don't, because I live in St. Paul, because I only have to write it a couple times a week. Sometimes little controversies escape me, and I have to admit this whole college records thing as being the equivalent to Romney's tax records that Donald Trump seems to be pursuing,
right,
mystifies me. Like I just have I guess there are some people that see that equivalency, and there are some people that think that there might be some kind of atomic bomb hidden in Obama's college transcripts, that would just blow up the whole thing. But I personally, I heard someone on CNN say that they wanted Donald Trump to get up at the Republican National Convention and talk about Obama's college transcripts. As someone who's sympathetic to the Democratic side, I would welcome that as well. I think that'd be great. Spend your time doing that.
Yeah, it goes along with the president hasn't been vetted, but he is the president of the United States. I mean, what more do you need to know from this guy? But, we'd really love to talk to you all day long. We're already over as is. I do want to say my favorite retweet of yours from the day, we always like looking at our guests' timelines, the nothing ever happens on Mars retweet from the sarcastic rover, the waiting for Guffman quote. 2 thumbs up, a million thumbs up. I don't know how many thumbs I have, but I give them all up to you and the sarcastic rover. Before we let you go, though, we always like to get who are your 2 or 3 must follows on Twitter?
Oh, wow. Besides Sarcastic Rover, which is the new one, which I do love. So at Sarcastic Rover, I got to say, Pour Me Coffee, if you guys aren't already following Pour Me Coffee.
Obviously, sure.
He's awesome. And then I'm trying to think of, if I could throw you a curveball on this. But I don't know if I can. I follow a lot of bands. I follow, Matador Records, and I follow Superchunk. And you know what? That's actually kind of awesome, because every once in a while there'll be a political tweet, and you realize that the world is kind of smaller than you think it is.
Right.
That's awesome. Well, we like those. And if you think of any more, feel free to tweet us at Politics Radio.
Okay, will do.
Yeah, but Anna Marie Cox, she is at Anna Marie Cox. She is the beloved Anna Marie Cox of more than 1.3 million followers. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.